What happens when a billionaire's world collides with the innocence of a homeless boy? One simple act of kindness changes everything, sparking a journey that neither of them could ever have imagined. Victor Klein was a man of immense wealth, a tech mogul who had built an empire from the ground up. He lived in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, a symbol of his success, but it was also a fortress that kept everyone at a distance. Despite all his accomplishments, Victor felt a profound emptiness that no amount of money or power could fill. His mornings began in meetings and ended in solitude, surrounded by the luxury he'd earned but unable to enjoy. The source of his pain was rooted deep in the past. Victor had a younger brother, Luke, who had tragically passed away in an accident years ago. Since that day, Victor had buried himself in his work, unable to cope with the loss. He had built walls around his heart, pushing away everyone who tried to get close, convinced that opening up would only bring more pain. The mansion he called home, once a dream come true, now felt like a prison. But despite his isolation, a part of him still longed for something more, a chance to reconnect with the world and heal the wounds he had ignored for far too long. On the other side of the city lived Noah Jackson, a young boy who had never known comfort. At just 12 years old, he had learned the harsh realities of life far too soon. After his mother passed away, he found himself alone on the streets, surviving on whatever he could find. Each day was a fight for survival, but Noah never gave up hope. His sharp wit and unyielding spirit kept him going, even when the world seemed to turn its back on him. Noah's life was a constant cycle of hardship, but he always carried a sense of wonder and curiosity about the world around him. He had heard stories of the wealthy, of people who lived in mansions and never had to worry about where their next meal would come from. But to him, they were just stories, abstract, distant, and out of reach. One day, as he wandered the city streets, Noah found himself in front of Victor Klein's mansion. He was intrigued by the imposing gates and the perfectly manicured lawns. On a whim, he decided to explore the area, unaware that his simple curiosity would soon lead him to an encounter that would change both of their lives forever. Victor never expected his life to intersect with Noah's. As the boy wandered close to the mansion gates, his eyes caught a glimpse of something he hadn't seen in a long time: a bicycle tire in the trash, just behind the ornate gate. Victor, who was working from his study, happened to look out the window at that exact moment. It was a rare occurrence for him to even glance outside, much less pay attention to the details of life beyond his estate. He was about to turn away when he noticed Noah dirty, hungry, and alone circling the gates, trying to figure out how to retrieve the tire. There was something oddly familiar about the boy's determination, a spark in his eyes that reminded Victor of the ambition he once had. But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that Noah didn't seem afraid to approach the imposing mansion, as though the world inside it was no different than the world he already knew. Intrigued by the boy's tenacity, Victor made a snap decision. Rather than sending his staff to deal with the situation, he went outside himself. This one small gesture would set off a chain of events that neither of them could have foreseen. Noah hadn't expected anyone to come out. In fact, he was prepared to scurry away if anyone from the mansion spotted him. He had lived on the streets long enough to know that the rich didn't typically show any interest in people like him. But when Victor approached, Noah froze for a moment, unsure of what to expect. Victor's gaze wasn't cold or dismissive like the wealthy people Noah had encountered before. Instead, there was a strange mix of curiosity and something softer in his expression. He didn't scold Noah or call security. Instead, he asked the boy if he needed help. Surprised but also wary, Noah hesitated before speaking. He wasn't used to adults offering help without expecting something in return. But there was something different about this man. Without asking for anything in return, Victor handed Noah the tire he had been eyeing. "Take it," Victor said simply, with no strings attached. Noah, confused but grateful, took it and thanked him, though it was clear he didn't fully understand why someone like Victor would offer such kindness. This unexpected moment of generosity was just the beginning of a life-changing journey for both of them. Noah couldn't shake the memory of the unexpected encounter with Victor. The tire he had taken from the mansion wasn't just a useful piece of junk. It felt like a symbol of something bigger, a connection to a world he thought he'd never have a place in. The next few days were filled with the usual struggles for Noah, finding food, searching for shelter, and trying to avoid the city's harsh realities. But the mansion, with its grand gates and its mysterious owner, remained on his mind. Victor, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about Noah either. The boy's face lingered in his thoughts, long after their brief interaction had ended. There was something about him that pulled at Victor's heart, something raw and unpretentious, a contrast to the polished and controlled world he inhabited. It wasn't just the way Noah had approached the gates with no fear. It was the way he had accepted the help without hesitation or suspicion. Victor found himself wondering what had led Noah to a life on the streets. What had made him so different from the entitled, isolated people in Victor's own social circles? Days passed, and Victor's curiosity grew. He found himself at the window more often, watching for any sign of the boy. Something inside him shifted. The loneliness he had buried under layers of work and wealth began to surface again, and he realized just how much he had been missing the human connections that he had once taken for granted. Victor's internal struggle continued. Despite his growing desire to know more about Noah, he couldn't quite bring himself to seek the boy out. It was as if reaching out to someone like Noah would somehow expose how disconnected he had become from the world. But then, one fateful afternoon, Victor saw him again. Noah had returned to the gates, but this time he wasn't alone. He was carrying a small bundle of what appeared to be broken electronics and scrap metal. Victor watched as Noah carefully approached the mansion, inspecting the trash pile near the side gate as if it were treasure. The sight of the boy picking through discarded items stirred something deep inside Victor, an impulse he couldn't ignore. In that moment, he made up his mind. He had to know more about Noah. This wasn't just some fleeting curiosity anymore. Something about the boy's resilience, his willingness to keep going no matter how difficult life had become, spoke to Victor in a way that nothing else had in years. He couldn't help but feel that Noah was somehow teaching him more about the world and about himself than anyone else ever had. Victor decided to approach. As he walked toward Noah, the distance between the two men seemed to shrink, and with each step, Victor felt the weight of his own isolation becoming lighter. As Victor approached, Noah noticed him almost immediately. The moment their eyes met, a flicker of recognition passed between them. Noah wasn't sure why, but he felt like the man wasn't like the others he had encountered. He didn't seem to look down on him or treat him like an inconvenience. For a brief second, Noah wondered if this was just another moment where the rich would toss him a few coins or, worse, dismiss him completely. But to his surprise, Victor stopped in front of him, not with the harsh authority of someone used to power, but with an expression that was open, even vulnerable. "You still here?" Victor asked, his voice soft but steady, breaking the silence that had hung between them. Noah wasn't sure how to respond, unsure of the reason why Victor was speaking to him at all. "I was just looking for some things I can fix," Noah muttered, holding up the bundle of discarded electronics. "Sometimes people throw out stuff that can still be useful." He paused, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I like to fix things." Victor looked down at the pile of broken gadgets and nodded, genuinely interested. "You know how to fix these?" he asked, the genuine curiosity in his tone unmistakable. Noah hesitated, then shrugged. "It's not hard if you know what you are doing. I've been doing it for a while." Victor couldn't help but feel a deep admiration for the boy. Despite all the odds stacked against him, Noah seemed to have an innate understanding of how to make something out of nothing. It was a skill that Victor, with all his wealth and resources, had never truly learned the art of resilience, of finding value where others saw none. The conversation that followed was unlike any Victor had experienced in years. They talked for what felt like hours, yet neither of them noticed the time passing. Noah spoke about his life on the streets, about his mother, and the years spent trying to survive. He didn't speak with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that was foreign to Victor. There was a raw honesty in his words, a stark contrast to the carefully curated facades of the people Victor knew. Victor found himself opening up, something he hadn't done in so long. He shared pieces of his own past the death of his brother, the regrets that had haunted him, and the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, Victor found himself speaking about the things that hurt, the things he had buried so deep in his soul. And Noah, for all his hardships, didn't look at him with pity. Instead, he listened with an empathy that caught Victor off guard. When they finally parted ways that afternoon, Victor found himself inexplicably changed. The walls he had so carefully constructed seemed a little weaker, and a part of him, one he had forgotten existed, felt a spark of hope. Noah had shown him that even in the darkest corners of life, there was light if only one was willing to see it. As Victor watched the boy disappear into the distance, he knew that this was just the beginning of something larger than either of them could yet understand. The paths of their lives had crossed for a reason, and whatever lay ahead, it was bound to change everything. It didn't take long for Victor to realize that his encounter with Noah had shifted something deep within him. Over the following weeks, he found himself thinking about the boy more and more. Noah's resilience, his resourcefulness, and the way he faced life head-on without ever losing hope were qualities Victor admired. It wasn't long before he invited Noah back to the mansion, wanting to offer him something beyond just a fleeting moment of kindness. But what he hadn't expected was for their next meeting to unravel a truth about himself that had been buried for years. Noah arrived at the mansion one afternoon, uncertain of what to expect. Victor greeted him warmly and led him inside. The mansion, grand and imposing, felt cold and uninviting, but as they spoke, Noah's presence seemed to soften the sterile atmosphere. Victor had prepared a tour of the estate, but the real purpose of the meeting was to understand more about each other. As they strolled through the grand hallways, Victor showed Noah the photos of his family, including a picture of his brother Luke, who had died in the accident. Without thinking, Victor mentioned that his brother had once been an inventor. It was a comment that seemed so casual, but it caught Noah's attention. "Your brother was an inventor?" Noah asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Victor's heart tightened. "He was. We were close once. He had dreams of creating things that could change the world, just like you do. But after the accident, everything changed." Noah listened, but he couldn't quite understand the full weight of Victor's words. Yet something in the way Victor spoke about his brother, the pain that still lingered in his voice, made Noah realize how much the loss still haunted him. Noah, who had learned to mask his own pain on the streets, could see that Victor had never truly let go of his grief. It was at that moment that Noah realized they weren't so different after all. Both of them had lost something precious. Victor had lost his brother, and Noah had lost his mother. Both were still carrying their respective burdens, though in different ways. Noah wanted to ask more, to delve deeper into Victor's past, but something held him back. Victor, too, was hesitant to reveal more than he already had. The breakthrough came unexpectedly just a few days later, when Noah visited the mansion once again. This time, however, the visit was far from ordinary. As they were walking through the gardens, Noah tripped over a small patch of uneven ground, falling and twisting his ankle. He cried out in pain, and Victor rushed to his side. "Are you all right?" Victor asked, his voice urgent. Noah, through gritted teeth, nodded but looked down at his ankle, which was already beginning to swell. Victor, who had always been distant from any real human connection, found himself in a rare moment of vulnerability. Without thinking, he scooped Noah up in his arms and rushed him inside to tend to the injury. As Victor carefully bandaged Noah's ankle, something shifted within him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his own pain, his wealth, or his empire. All that mattered in that moment was the boy in front of him. Victor realized that he had been so focused on building walls around his heart, protecting himself from further loss, that he had forgotten the power of caring for another person. Noah, for his part, was surprised by Victor's reaction. He had never experienced such care from anyone, let alone someone as powerful as Victor. As Victor finished bandaging his ankle, their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, they both understood something profound. Victor had been living a life of isolation, and Noah had been surviving. But in that moment, their worlds collided in a way that could never be undone. Victor, his usual guarded demeanor gone, looked at Noah and spoke the words he had been avoiding for years. "I am sorry for everything." His voice cracked, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of his brother's death, the years of regret, and the loneliness that had haunted him. Noah, sensing the depth of Victor's pain, replied with a quiet understanding. "It's not too late to change, you know. Sometimes all it takes is a little help, just like I needed back then. He had no idea how powerful his words would be, but they resonated deeply with Victor. In the days following the accident, a subtle transformation began to take place in Victor. The walls that had once defined his life started to crumble. He spent more time with Noah, not out of obligation but out of a newfound sense of connection. They would sit together in the garden, talking about everything and nothing about inventions, lost loved ones, and the strange intersection of their lives. Noah shared his dreams of creating things that could help others, and Victor, for the first time in years, began to see a spark of his brother's ambition in Noah's words. Victor knew he couldn't change the past. His brother, Luke, was gone and no amount of wealth or success could bring him back. But he could change his future. He could make a difference in the world, not just for himself, but for others as well. Noah had taught him something invaluable, that life wasn't just about what you had, but what you gave. It was about the connections you made and the lives you touched, no matter how small the gesture. Victor's decision to start a foundation for underprivileged children, a cause that had always been close to his heart, became a turning point. With Noah's guidance, he began to channel his wealth into meaningful projects, things that would provide real change for the less fortunate. Together, they worked to bring awareness to the issues facing the homeless, the forgotten, and those like Noah who had learned to survive against all odds. The changes in Victor's life were profound, but so too were the changes in Noah's. For the first time, Noah had a stable home, a place where he could not only rest but dream. Victor, who had once lived in isolation, had become a father figure to him, offering not just shelter, but an education, guidance, and hope for the future. The mansion, once a cold and lifeless place, had become a home filled with laughter and possibility. Victor found himself reconnecting with his community, hosting events that brought people from all walks of life together. Noah's influence on Victor was undeniable. It was Noah who encouraged Victor to open up to his employees, to show kindness and empathy where there had once been distance. And as the weeks passed, it became clear that the boy who had once been a stranger was now part of Victor's family, a bond forged through shared hardship, healing, and growth. Victor's staff, including Miss Grace, who had once worried about his emotional detachment, began to see the change in him. She had been with Victor for years, but she had never seen him as present as he was now. The transformation wasn't just in Victor's actions, it was in the way he saw the world. And for Noah, the future that once seemed uncertain now glowed with possibility. He had not only found a mentor in Victor, but a true friend. In Victor's kindness, he saw not just a wealthy man, but someone who had rediscovered the value of human connection. The months following the formation of Victor's foundation had been some of the most rewarding of his life. His days were now filled with meetings and community events, all aimed at changing the lives of children who, like Noah, had little to no opportunities. But even more than the work, Victor had found himself immersed in relationships that he hadn't even known he was missing. People who truly cared about him, who didn't view him just as the wealthy businessman he once was, but as someone who had changed for the better. Victor had become a mentor, not just to Noah, but to many others in the community. Through his foundation, he had opened doors for young minds, offering them not only financial support but the emotional guidance they needed to succeed. The mansion that had once echoed with silence and sorrow now pulsed with life and laughter. Victor had hired several young people from the community to work alongside him, bringing fresh energy into the once cold halls of his home. Despite the success of the foundation, Victor remained deeply focused on the lessons that Noah had taught him, lessons of humility, resilience, and the importance of true human connection. As he continued to build on the work Noah had helped him start, Victor reflected on how much had changed. For Noah, things had come full circle. The young boy who once roamed the streets, struggling to survive, now stood in a place of opportunity and potential. With Victor's mentorship, Noah's passion for innovation grew stronger, and he began making his mark in the world of technology. He had already created several small inventions aimed at helping those less fortunate, simple but impactful solutions that made a real difference for people living on the streets. It was Victor who encouraged Noah to pursue his dreams with everything he had. "You have the mind and the heart for something bigger than you could have ever imagined," Victor had told him one day while they sat in the mansion's grand library. It was in those moments surrounded by books and ideas that Noah realized he wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a creator. He was becoming the very person Victor had seen in him from the start, someone capable of changing the world. At school, Noah's teachers began to take notice of his growing intelligence and ambition. His grades soared, and soon he was invited to present his ideas at local tech conferences. For the first time in his life, Noah was treated with the same respect and admiration that he had once seen only in the wealthy, privileged people who had seemed so far out of his reach. And through it all, Victor stood by him, offering guidance and support every step of the way. The mansion, once the symbol of Victor's isolation, was now a beacon of hope and change. It became a central hub for the Foundation's work, where kids from all walks of life came to receive scholarships, mentorship, and a chance to dream. But perhaps one of the most profound changes that Victor had made was his decision to open the mansion to the community in a more personal way. He hosted regular dinners, inviting not just the people who worked for him, but also those who were directly impacted by the Foundation's work, Noah's old friends, the families of the children they helped, and even the local homeless population that Victor had once turned a blind eye to. Every evening, the mansion's dining room would come alive with conversation, laughter, and the sounds of people sharing stories and meals. The table was always set for anyone who needed a place to belong. It was in these moments that Victor found his true sense of peace, realizing that he was not only rebuilding his own life, but also offering the same opportunity to others. Noah's presence in the mansion had become a constant reminder to Victor of how far they had both come. They were no longer two isolated souls lost in a world of grief and hardship. They were partners in something much bigger, a family built on love, empathy, and a shared vision of making the world a better place. One evening, as Victor watched Noah working on his latest invention in the study, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. The boy he had once helped was now on the cusp of changing the world in ways Victor could never have imagined. In that moment, Victor realized that it was never about the mansion, the wealth, or even the Foundation. It was about the connections they had formed, the way they had both grown and healed together. When the evening drew to a close, Victor called everyone together in the dining room for one last toast. As they all raised their glasses, he looked around at the faces of those who had become his new family. "This," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "this is what life is truly about. It's about the people we meet along the way and the ways we help one another grow. It's about giving back, showing kindness, and building something meaningful together." Noah, now a young man full of potential, smiled at him. "You were right, Victor. It's about helping each other rise." In the quiet of the mansion, with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoing in the background, Victor finally understood what he had been searching for all along. He had spent years thinking that success was about what you could accumulate, but now he knew that true success was measured in the lives you touched, the relationships you built, and the love you gave. As the camera zoomed out, the mansion, once a symbol of isolation, now stood as a testament to the power of connection, compassion, and second chances. A place where two very different lives had crossed paths, changed forever, and together created a new story, one of healing, hope, and the potential for greatness in every corner of the world.